Hi folks, this is Serra from UserGuiding, and this is your quick guide to onboarding UX patterns and which one is the best one for your product. Let's dive right in. But before we go, you might want to subscribe, because we have the best tips and tricks for user onboarding in UX. So without further ado now, let's start. Now, quick disclaimer, there is a traditional classification of UX patterns for onboarding. It goes annotated patterns to point to something specific, embedded patterns to announce something, and dedicated patterns to ask your users for something. But we at UserGuiding have our own classification of two: tour onboarding and contextual onboarding. Tour onboarding is for the initial onboarding where users take tours around the product, and contextual onboarding is for when there is something specific you want to bring attention to after the initial onboarding. And the types of UX patterns I'll mention in a second can be either, depending on how you use them. If that's clear, let's talk about product tours, self-segmentation, checklists, interactive guides, hotspots, and tooltips. Let's starting with product tours. A product tour is a quick tour of a product or a feature that is often used in the very first session. And yes, people tend to hate them, but if you know to keep it to less than 8 steps and skippable, you might just see how helpful they are. Canva gets me with this example. Second up, we have self-segmentation, which you might be familiar with thanks to Netflix, Pinterest, or MailChimp. The main goal of self-segmentation for users is to make sure you are offering the right experience to users, and a good perk is getting more accurate data from the user segments. Especially for SaaS businesses, this one you cannot skip. Moving on to our next UX pattern, checklists bring a nice touch of gamification to any SaaS product that needs it, while also helping users comprehend the features and get hands-on as they learn. Our very own onboarding checklist might be a good example here. Now, don't tell me you don't want a little bit of fun in your product. After all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Interactive guides is next up. And no, an interactive guide is not the same as a product tour. The main difference is, well, the former is actually interactive, and most of the time, interactive guides tend to be more contextual and even gamified. The best part is, an interactive guide helps users actually use your product as they learn, and believe me, you need that sweet muscle memory more than you can imagine. Here's a cool example from our interactive guide for the new in-app survey feature. See what I mean? And our last two UX patterns are hotspots and tooltips. Tooltips are little tips inside your UI pointing at a specific element, and a hotspot is a tooltip that has a blinking dot to draw attention to the tooltip. Now, these two patterns are relatively smaller UX elements, but their impact can make or break your user experience. They're especially essential for contextual onboarding and when you don't want to create friction in the UX. Here's how well it works for Zakiki, and here is a tooltip you might be familiar with from Duolingo. So the big question, which pattern do you need? The answer is simple: any and every one of them that can help elevate your UX for the better. You're the one who knows your product best. Definitely include different UX patterns in your onboarding, but also be careful not to overdo it. As long as you test and optimize regularly, there is no way you'll get it wrong. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the full onboarding UX patterns guide on our blog. See you next time!